Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. I suppose you would put this particular video down to a late night meandering. So if you're one of those who thinks, oh God, not another war and peace, you should duck out now. I'm trying to be friends, okay? But I was looking, I needed a question answered. One of those little phrases that sticks in your head and you don't know where it came from, and you want to try to find out where it came from. And I remembered something that I thought that Christ had said, and this is not strictly a religious chat, but I thought that I remembered something that Christ said about if two criminals are working together, they eventually will attack each other, because it's the criminal way. To dishonest or to cheaters or betrayers, betraying other people together, they'll end up betraying each other. And I put that out to three of my friends to see if they could tell me where that came from in the Bible, and I did get a very extensive response from one that was a great deal more than I expected, and of course very interesting, and that was from my friend Steve. And at the end of it, it turns out, from across these three people who have tried to answer my question of where that quote was in the Bible, I assumed, because it had Jesus' name attached to it, I assumed it was from the Bible. It turns out that it must have been paraphrased from something in the Bible, but to get off that. But when I apologized to my friend Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to plunge you into so much research. He said, don't apologize. That's something that I love, because it keeps the brain active. To which I said, well, that piece of cotton wool that I'm referring to as my brain at the moment needs a little bit of action. And it made me start thinking about that point that I've made, and I've seen this on many of the quote books that I have. I have lots of different books that are quotation books, and they're full of quotes. In fact, the book that I just got from my friend Paul in Australia, if I can show that to you. Oh boy, Paul, you really outdid me this time. You outdid yourself. This is the book that he sent. It's actually, I've had 101 quotations from my other friends, Mr. and Mrs. O, but this one, look at the size of this book. It's 1001, but look at the size of it. There's my finger. It gives you an idea. It's at least 2¼ inches thick. Well, I no doubt will be reading from that because it always makes great reading. But anyway, it made me look at some of the other books, and I was really into the book that I was sent by Truman Capote, and I think that this was from Roger. Now, if I've had such a lot of books sent that if I get the sender wrong, please forgive me. All right, but I think that this was sent by Roger. Truman Capote and his collection, the whole collection of stories from Truman Capote. Now, a lot of these people, you may be like me, that you hardly knew anything about them, and so when people start quoting, yes, well, this one was a rather wonderful collection of stories from Truman Capote, you might get put off by it. Well, believe me, I'm just as, well, as my mother used to say, common as milk. But I read. So Truman Capote, that's a big thank you from him, because his collection of short stories were so wonderful that I just hated to finish one because I was enjoying it so much. Now that's a good story. Plus, the mark of a good story is when you want to go back and read it again. John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck, he is beyond reproach. One of the great writers of America. And I recently read Pastures of Heaven, which was the only one that I've actually got of John Steinbeck. Now, one of the other, if I can recommend one of the others of his from the Pastures of Heaven and that area in California, was Cannery Row. Now, if you can find a copy of Cannery Row, there's wonderful stories. Now, this one was a collection. This was an unusual book. I didn't actually take to this book at first. I don't know, something about the cover, or I don't know what it was, but I struggled with even opening it. And then when I finally did open it and start reading, it was wonderful. So that's a collection, and it's a collection of stories by all different people. But what this was, The Kindness of Strangers, it was the accounts of real people and real situations, how in the most unlikely situations, ones which could have been very dangerous, actually turned out to be wonderful experiences just on the kindness of strangers. So that's a wonderful book that I would recommend. And there's a preface by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it's edited by John George, I think. Don George. I haven't got my glasses on. So that's one there. What's the next one on my list? James Thurber. Oh boy, I always thought of James Thurber as this classical writer, you know, probably dry. I'm telling you how wrong you can be. And then I found in a huge collection of short stories by so many of the world's great writers, and I found the story, the life of Walter Mitty, and that is such an incredible story, and it's by James Thurber. That made me welcome this gift of a collection of some of the stories of James Thurber, and I read them with delight. Just wonderful stories. So have a look at James Thurber, and the little book that I have, which I don't actually have here, it's on the shelf somewhere, and I can't see it. It might well be upstairs by the bed. The life of Walter Mitty is what it looks like on the cover. Now this one, I'm not really actually sure how to pronounce this name, but it's Paolo. What can I tell you? Paolo Cholo or Chelo. Well, I'll show you the book. That's that there. Now he had a best-selling book called The Alchemist, and The Alchemist was brilliant writing. And now there's this one, which was a follow-up, I think, of, or certainly one of the follow-ups of the Alchemist. And The Alchemist was the story of a boy who goes in search of treasure, and of course he finds a different treasure to what he really found out. But many soul-searching things that come up in Paolo's book. I'll avoid trying to murder that second name of his. So, and then another book that I was surprised at how interested I got on this, and it was called The Little Book of Wisdom. And I thought, oh, that's a little bit arrogant, isn't it? You've written a book and called it The Little Book of Wisdom. But it was actually a great book, incredibly practical on so many things. And that book, I've lent that to my friend Michael. He's getting through that. Either that or he's given it back to me and I haven't put it back on the shelf. But anyway, The Little Book of Wisdom, wonderful book, and full of real life stories and experiences from the writer, who, for the life of me, I can't remember. Nothing new there, yeah? Right, so I read loads of books of quotes, and a lot of them I've shared with you. Now, the one that I'm reading right now, which I have to tell you is hard going, because this is another book. Look at it. This is one that, looking at this, you might be persuaded to pass it on for the Beano or the Dandy. But anyway, this is an incredible book. Now, if you've ever felt yourself wondering, oh yeah, but what about the Bible? I mean, you know, who wrote it? I mean, it was written thousands of years afterwards by, I mean, who can remember? I can't remember what I did last Tuesday. How can they remember years, hundreds of years later, and write down what was written and what was said and what happened? How could they do that? In this book, by the title, as you can see, The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict. This man, Josh McDowell, he is so clued up, and you can imagine that this goes through so much evidence, and it is one volume to answer questions challenging Christians in the 21st century. And I know that there is so much about the Bible that I don't know. Well, even that's a little bit arrogant. I mean, I know very little about the Bible. I've read it, but what I understand is that much of it is written in code and in symbolism, and so that's one of those things. You need someone like Josh McDowell to explain some of the symbolism in it. But what McDowell is doing in this book, he is educating you about all of the evidence for why the Bible is the book that it is. It's had more translations into more languages than any other book. It's found in bits of parchment from all over the world. There was a common Bible in Africa that was circulating there, and in, I believe, Egypt. Now, there's so much information in this book. I read this book when I go to bed, and it's not easy because in our bedroom we don't have any electricity, so I take a flashlight and I put the flashlight up like this so that it's pointing over my shoulder, and that's how I read this. Well, just holding this book up is a bit of a chore. But I've been amazed at how much support and evidence, as he says there, the new evidence. It's not that it's new, it's just that it's never put, I don't think has ever been put down in one huge volume like this. And the point's made in that if anybody enters into sets himself up as a critic of the Bible, he would have to do that by researching how much evidence there is to support the Bible. Now, we have evidence of ancient writings of so many of the ancient writers from Greece. We know about plays that were written in the time of the Greeks. We know all kinds of stuff which doesn't have a fraction of the evidence for its authenticity as the Bible does, and yet we accept it completely as being authentic. The Bible comes up with opposition, because as soon as you accept, for the moment, for the sake of argument, if you accept that there is a force of good, then evidently there must be a force of evil. If you accept that there is God who is good, then there is the devil or Satan or Lucifer, whoever you want to call it, and there are whole stories about that. The fallen angels, the fall of the angels, Lucifer taking control of, certainly a lot of control over the earth and what happens on the earth. You might remember that, I think it was at the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was he wasn't tempted because he didn't need what Lucifer was offering, but Lucifer surveyed the earth and said, I can give you all of this if you will bow down to me. And Christ told him where to go. Get thee behind me, Satan. That was the quote I remember on that. So, my assessment of this book from only, well, what have I done? Oh boy. I think I've read about, I've read, and it's been a struggle, I've read 48 pages, and the book is 760 pages. So if I'm to be viewed at all, I'm just a beginner. But boy, I think, judging by those 48 pages, if I could just digest and remember all that's in this book about the Bible, I would deserve a PhD. And I can tell you on what I can actually remember out of the first 48 pages, the PhD might be on permanent hold. But this is A Foreigner in the Philippines. I know it's gone on a long time, 17 minutes, but what the heck. Thanks for looking in, thanks for listening, if you're still here, and bye for now.